Welcome to Building Innovation, the podcast, convening experts to discuss issues and solutions.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Building Innovation, the podcast, where every episode we bring subject matter experts to support advances in building science and technology. I'm your host, Johnny Fortune, and I am absolutely thrilled today to be joined by a superstar in the industry, Mr. Paul Doherty. Thank you so much for joining us, Paul.
Well, thank you, Johnny. And I have to say congratulations on your recent achievement because you are Dr. Johnny now.
Thank you. Thank you. A long path and journey. But thank you for that acknowledgement. But I want to talk about you. Let's kick this thing off and talk about, tell us a little something about yourself and what you do.
Well, I'm an architect, proud of that, builder, and now I'm a real estate developer. So I feel like I've been going up levels. What I'm known for is innovation, mostly in the technology end of things, but most recently now with urban innovations that have real impact on people. I'm thinking I'm at that point in my career where making money is making money, but making a difference and an impact, well, that gets me up out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at right now. I own a company called the Digit Group. We're a boutique type of real estate development firm in that we focus in on urban environments for people that some people call smart cities.
Yeah. So you're an author, you're a speaker, you're a solutions provider in many ways, and you really have made a huge impact. Some very notable works you've put out over the years.
Well, thank you, Johnny. Yeah, it's been I've been very fortunate. I'd like to liken myself that the movie Forrest Gump was a documentary of my life. Because if I planned this, I'd be a genius, but I'm just Irish and I'm lucky. But you take advantage of when opportunities come.
Yeah.
And if anything, if any of your listeners have courage, these are amazing times that we're in. Some people call it scary, especially with the newer innovations that are coming fast. I tend to look at it as just an evolutionary period of how the built environment is created, how it's managed. And I really feel strongly that the National Institute of Building Sciences has such an important role of taking these stories that are out there. And there's tons of really great superheroes out there that are doing great work. But we need to storytell. Yeah. So I appreciate you having this podcast because that's one big direction that people can hear that they may be thinking, I've always wanted to do that. Do it. Do it. There is nothing in this world that you need permission to be successful. Just go be successful.
What a great perspective. Yeah, and it's obvious one reason you're so successful is very charismatic, very personable. I've seen you here we're recording from Building Innovation Conference, and I've seen you interacting with several people, and it's like everybody knows you, and you're a friend to everybody. So I know that those characteristics and traits lead to a lot of success as well.
It's called being Irish.
Very good. Well, so let's talk about, you mentioned NIBS and your passion for the work that we're doing. And I know you've been involved in probably many more than I can name, but tell us a little bit about your history with NIBS and some of the things you've been involved in.
I got introduced to NIBS just about 20 years ago. So it was your 30th anniversary. Oh. And congratulations on the 50th. How cool. So it's important to celebrate those milestones because when you do look back on it, sometimes, especially in our industry, when we're so hands-on, we have our heads down. We're doing noble work out there. And I think with organizations like NIBS, when I first got exposed to it, was speaking at a Building Innovations conference. And back then, I was talking about this new thing called web browsers and the internet. And I had people come up to me saying, it's just a fad.
Wow.
So, you fast forward to today and the announcements even yesterday on Wall Street with NVIDIA, with their earnings reports. That was a milestone watershed moment that not a lot of people paid attention to. But in my mind, this is ushering in the market acceptance for technologies that they yet don't understand. This is that next phase, Internet 2.0. And I couldn't be happier to hear discussions around here between practitioners, government officials, all put together through the National Institute of Building Sciences. But what's interesting about this conference in particular is people do have courage to say, listen, this is what I'm doing. And they have the courage to expose themselves that way. But what I love about what you guys have done here with the different types of conferences that I have been involved with, mostly speaking, right, is that you create a nurturing environment, not to have finger pointing, but for inclusion of ideas. And what I love about meeting the people here, including yourself, is that you've got great ideas. I have ideas, but when you put the two together, a third, even better idea comes of that. And I think that needs to be celebrated more because we are so busy. We're so good at what we do in our industry. Sometimes we don't take that step back for that acknowledgement, because there's only three things that we need on this planet to survive as human beings. And that's fresh water, safe food, and shelter. So everyone that's listening on this podcast, if you are in this industry and you're working, no matter what level it is, be it an intern, be it an old fart like me, being an architect, we all have one direction, and that is to keep the human race alive. It's a noble cause.
Yeah.
So every day you should be getting up out of bed, bounding out of bed, and embracing what you do.
So it's clear when you talk, you're such a visionary. It's absolutely clear that you have been very forward-thinking, and you've brought a lot of great ideas and compiled a lot of great ideas from the community, and you've put that into some of your works. And I will say, you've presented this year at Building Innovation due to extreme high demand from last year. I heard as much about your session last year at Building Innovation than I did any of them. I do recall that it was a big hit. People were talking about it for weeks afterwards. The standing room only, so much interest in these ideas, a great visionary for now and the future. And I think people really appreciate that, your approach. And you've put that in writing. It's one thing to speak it. It's one thing to think it, another thing to speak it, but writing is a whole new level. And I know you've devoted many years of your life to some of your works in writing. So let's talk about those.
Well, thanks, Johnny. It's one of these things that if I would have known what it took to put out my first book, I don't think I would have done it. Sometimes, naivety is half the ball game right there. But I'm glad I did it because it memorialized something that the internet was not a fad. I was working when I was going to school. I went to school in New York City for architectural school, and I did well. So they had a program at my college where you could take off a semester and work to lower your internship hours, and then go back to school. So I took a lot longer to get my to get my architecture degree, but I gained a lot of experience. And I could have went to work with any of the big architecture firms in New York City, but I knew I was going to be doing bathroom details.
Yeah.
Like, who wants to do that? But IBM had an opening. And so I became IBM's global designer for their trade show booths.
Oh, wow.
So I had to learn in the late 80s everything to do with computers because I had to learn many mainframes, things like AS400s, RS6000s, PS2 architecture, token ring networks, and then install and showcase not only the hardware, which is why I had to learn how these things work, motherboards and all that stuff, but also these brand new startup software companies that wanted to be seen on IBM equipment because then you were a business tool. So I was working with this brand new startup called Microsoft, Adobe,
wow,
Corel, all these things. And I worked with the leadership there because they wanted to be seen and I was the showcase designer, right? So I learned from very early on that I find it peculiar that why was the computer industry emulating the construction industry? Meaning that they had these things called OEMs or other equipment manufacturers that were doing the motherboards, the memory boards, all these different things. And then IBM would assemble them. And I went, isn't that the construction industry? Because the GC doesn't own windows and doors.
Yeah.
Right? They do the same thing. So I have always had this passion of why aren't buildings computers? Because we could put all of those things into the walls, floors, and ceilings. And then if we have one building, what would happen if that building, if it was a computer, could talk to another building and have the Internet of Buildings? So I used that approach in 1996 to say AOL and CompuServe is not the internet.
Yeah.
There's this other thing, because I learned it through IBM, because I was using what was called Profs. That was their email system way early on. So I had a leg up. And when I was working in a design build firm to get more internship before I got my license, I was able to use Lotus Notes to actually communicate with my project teams, because I was out in Long Island and there's just too many people, not enough space, traffic everywhere. So for me to visit job sites was a pain in the butt. But I could give them a 2400 baud modem, plug into the local phone line, and then I'd have notes, be able to communicate from my home base to any of my project sites. Right, 1992.
Wow.
Yeah. So what happened was 1993. I get an email from my friend at IBM, and he said, "Listen, telnet over to this thing called Mosaic and download it." Now, the cool part about Notes was that I was able to do what was called doc links. I could create a folder and then go off to my AutoCAD drawing or my specs in Microsoft Word and blah, 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 right? Way early on. But then I discovered this web browser thing. I fell in love with it, and I flew out to meet the guy that did it at the University of Illinois in Champaign, Illinois. And it was this guy named Mark Andreessen. And he showed me this graphic user interface that was free, yet I'm paying thousands of dollars to maintain Notes. I'm going, forget Notes.
Yeah.
Look at this thing called Hyperlink. And so I was asked to write a book on it. And 1996, this is what it was, Cyberplaces, published by RS Means.
Oh.
Right? So it's a book on how to use the internet, not AOL or CompuServe. And at the end, I wanted to show where the future could be for us, because we're a very graphics intensive industry. So I went ahead and I started to screen capture one of the projects that I was assisting on that was run by Planet 9 Studios in San Francisco. And they had a project from the San Francisco Giants baseball team they needed to show a 3D model of what the new stadium was going to look like, because they were moving from Candlestick Park, and they wanted the stakeholders like the mayor and the city council to see it. But they didn't want to spend money on things like 3D Max. So I had a friend that was involved with this thing called VRML out in Silicon Valley, which was a virtual reality markup language that you could use a web browser and see 3D geometries.
Really?
So it was a takeoff of HTML, right? So I took a screen capture of what we did. We were successful with it. And what you can see here is in Netscape, our VRML model of the San Francisco Giants baseball. I called it the Metaverse.
Wow.
1997, this was published. So there's been a lot of people, not just myself, that have been at this a long time.
Yeah.
So when you fast forward to last year and just what happened this morning, we like to storytell in a way that doesn't make it scary. That this has been here a long time, but our recollection and how we communicate, this new medium now that we have to interface with, is going to be a challenge for some people, because it's taking control away from certain people, but it's also going to do away with a large swath of people that make money off the inefficiencies in our industry. Because the transparency, not just of the 3D, but the other tools that support it, things like blockchain with smart contracts, things like AI that are taking care of a lot of the mundane work, so that it affords us to spend more time and potentially be a better human being. AI will help us be better human beings, because we're not doing the mundane stuff. But when you start seeing some of these characters out there that are talking about AI is going to take your job, blah, 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 it's not true. What will take your job is a person using AI. So that's the message that we have. It's been fun writing books about it and presenting, because, first of all, please buy the books, but I make no money off of it. It's about getting the ideas out there, because right now, if we don't have the morals and the ethics to move forward with these new tools at our fingertips, we have the opportunity to create a better built environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads into a lot of the concept of smart cities. And I don't know that there's been a lot of works, in terms of books, maybe several journals and articles and such. But I remember the release of your Smart Cities book. And I was excited to see that someone had undertaken this idea that's been floating and growing and memorialize it in a book. Can you tell us a little bit about that concept, please?
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. And wrote the book last year, And the Smart Cities book is interesting from the standpoint that if I were to just talk about the work that we've done up to that point, it's kind of like obsolete. So I wanted to leave it with more concept, and the understanding for many different types of stakeholders, because the book has been really successful, but not just with like the construction industry. It's been successful with governance, leadership, because I took a humanistic approach about this. I could talk about all the technologies and the coolness of decentralized water systems and new types of energy distribution and all sorts of fun stuff, autonomous public transportation, which we're doing.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to do is make it about humans, that it's a human-centric but data-driven urban environment are the future, if we like it or not. Only because the complexity of urban living, which we saw, firsthand how things can go sideways with COVID, and the lockdown. And now you're trying to reopen it. Yet we have this hybrid environment where, the place I used to go to lunch in certain cities isn't there anymore. Why? Because it's not supported because people are working from home, right? All of these things are very human, that have a direct effect on things. And how can we, in the design industry, in the construction industry, the facility management world, how can we make it a better place? And I'm watching some wonderful examples, BlackRock being one of them in Manhattan, where they consolidated all of their different offices into one building, but they're making that building, I want to go there. It's like an oasis, not just of work, but it's the level of experience that we're in now. It's no longer a level of detail. So that when we have the digital world, that we're all creating construction documents and whatnot, I'm looking at that and saying, well, that's great for communicating design intent, but to manage that facility and then to reuse it in other ways, such as putting it on a gaming engine and being able to have it as a virtual world, as a way of having a hybrid environment to enhance, I'm working from home, but I'm actually in my office, right? Then also when I'm in my office, it feels like there's this duality. There's this cyber-physical relationship. And that's what we're really striving for with this idea of reimagining the urban environment. That it's no longer a level of detail, it's a level of experience, and that becomes very rich in storytelling.
Yeah, I don't know that I've heard that from anyone else. I have heard a lot about level of development, level of detail, but level of experience is a new concept for me. I'm going to get a copy of that book, by the way.
Welcome to the dark side.
But that you mentioned the digital environment, and that kind of leads into another one of your works recently here is on the Metaverse.
Yeah. At the same time as I was about halfway through the book, writing it with Smart Cities, I got approached by John Wiley & Sons. They saw an article I wrote about how we were managing the physical nature of not only getting the concept in place and raising the money and building a place where people had never been before. Some people were calling them pop-up cities, and I didn't like that because cities over time take time, right? And it's about the human side of things. There are, certain celebrations that people have that then year after year after year become traditions. But those traditions also then create a mythology. Think Little Italy in New York.
Yeah.
Right? So the mythology, you can't just create, but you create the environment for those stories to be told. And that's where our greenfield cities have really started to take hold, where people start to fall in love with their environment, or maybe that's where they fell in love.
Yeah.
So all that human-esque, I wanted to try and capture in a way that allowed my two 13-year-old sons, right, who are gamers, and they have this world where they have this seamless way of going from the digital world into the physical world. They don't know the difference. They're the natives. We're the immigrants. So I wanted to capture that spirit, especially since, I put into context, the world of the metaverse way back in the day. But I wanted to let people know it's not here yet. Actually, we may never know when it's here. But the concept of virtual worlds now has real structure in behind it. So when I wrote the book, it's called Unlocking the Metaverse by John Wiley & Sons. And it became a #1 new release on Amazon.
Wow.
Which I was really proud of. Like I could tell my mom, and now she knows what I do for a living, right? But the idea behind writing the book was to explore these ideas of, if we're immigrants, let's do almost like the old Berlitz guides, like back in the day before you went to a foreign country, you got a Berlitz guide. You can learn little notes, where to go, where to stay, all that type of stuff, like a guidebook. That's kind of what this book is about, in saying that here's some examples about how we are taking things like blockchain, which are wonderful for our industry when it comes to smart contracts, because you're not filling out a field in a PDF document. You're writing into the code. So all the data becomes immutable, which means you can finally trust data, which hopefully will lead to people trusting themselves and trusting their relationships on a project. That's a very powerful message. And it's not about crypto bros and Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Blockchain has a whole other world for us to explore, which means that then when you put AI in there to take care of the mundane stuff, the stuff that you have to learn,
Yeah.
well, that's taken care of. It's almost like moving from, counting on your toes and your fingers for a math exam, and all of a sudden you can use a calculator. That's really where we're at. That as long as the processes are defined, and that's one thing that our industry doesn't do well. We do not process map. Not a lot of us.
Yeah.
Well, the people that do, boy, do they understand their business and then where to automate. So I think we're in a world now that is ripe for digital transformation, because these tools are the velocity of how they're coming at us, and the fact that these are not controlled by the existing warlords, the technological giants of our industry. They can't control it, and they never will. And I love that. It's this explosion of entrepreneurship, of understanding what AI is going to do for me. Because right now, AI is general public AI. It's like, using Google for everything. But when you start to take a look at certain organizations that are saying the large language models that are learning through repetition of how we work, and that's the essence of AI, is there's that repeatable pattern. Now all of a sudden, if I'm Arup, if I'm Shop Architects, if I'm KPF, whoever I am, I can make that for me. And it understands the instinctual way of what makes my firm, my business, my business. Now here's the cool part. There's a new technology that has been now standardized. In the old world of Internet 1.0, HTTP was what you defined a website, a two-dimensional website. That was Hypertext Transfer Protocol. What was just announced at Davos this past January was the emergence of HSTP, Hyperspatial Transfer Protocol, which means in 3 dimensions, I can now hyperlink between things and connect things. So now imagine this. I'm Arup, I'm an engineer. HKS is my architectural firm for this project. We connect our AI to the contractor, maybe it's DPR. And all of a sudden, I have a different type of relationship than anyone else on the planet. You're a true team. Because now your AIs are trusting each other, and they're all working together so that we can be more human. We can get to design issues. Because all that other stuff is taken care of. Work orders, change order, whatever it is, it's taken care of. So this hyperspatial transfer protocol is probably the best gift ever for the design and construction industry, because it's now linking the physical world and the digital world. So if anyone uses Nest or Ring, those are the cow paths of what I'm talking about. Because if you use Ring, like as we're sitting here, I got a notice that someone's at my front door in Memphis. And I can see who it is, and potentially also talk to them if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But that's the cyber-physical relationship. Now imagine everything is connected to everything. It's a quote by Leonardo da Vinci. He said, "I'm learning how to see again because everything is connected to everything."
Yeah, well, man, what an incredible perspective. You had a lot in there for us, and digital twins is also a component, right? And I think many people are still trying to wrap their heads around, well, what digital twin is and what does the metaverse look like for the AEC. And I know you've kind of covered some of these things in some of the sessions, but for the benefit of our audience who are really AECO centric, what, and you mentioned RFIs, handling some of those type of things. What are some of the other use cases that would really benefit this adoption of this technology?
So, great question, by the way, because it's an open-ended answer, only because it's yet to be defined. Meaning that I think the habits that we've had in the past, and habits can be, something on a computer or on your phone, or the way that you do a walkthrough for punch list items, or there's certain things that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
But those habits of the past are going to define the behaviors of your future. Meaning that the behaviors that you have for that by automating a punch list. But then what happens when I can send Spot from Boston Dynamics out with a GoPro camera, and through AI understands exactly where to go, and the camera identifies because of the vehicle of this robot going through, where it identifies all of the different pieces, communicates that back to the subtrade and or the GC, and things get done. Because it's not like, hey, here's $10, don't worry about that, I'll take care of the next project. All of that stuff, all that inefficiencies, all that semi-unethical behavior, it goes away.
Yeah.
Now what happens? Well, it's going to piss off a lot of people, and they won't want this, and they'll probably sabotage a lot of this stuff because they make money off the inefficiencies.
Right.
But the transparency, I think, it's going to allow us to use design as a preferred future. We can simulate now things like we couldn't simulate before because of time, money, and expense. So another use case is that a friend of mine, he was one of the people that was at the pioneering start of the internet. His name's Richard Boyd out of Ultisim in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Big shout out to you, brother. He's coined the term that we are living in the simulation century, that everything used to be rearview mirror.
Yeah.
Or right now. But we now have tools that can define a preferred future of what we want, bias included. But we now have control over providing the pathway, defining the horizon line, creating the pathway, and then allowing time and budget to be explored better. Right? So we're in this really, really cool period where the internet created connections between people. Email, websites, they connected people.
Yeah.
Then data started to come in. But now we're connecting data, people, and the physical built environment together. We've never had this before in the history of humankind. So we're going to make mistakes, spectacular failures.
Yeah.
Do it often, do it quick, because that's how we learn.
Love it. That's fantastic. You've talked about you've laid out several opportunities and ideas and visions. I'm curious, from your perspective, what would you say is like the top challenge, or maybe the top couple of challenges that you see for us to move into that piece that you have been envisioning?
I think when we're looking at all this change, that we don't give up hope, or we just pray that we're going to retire before we have to learn something else new. That we are literally creating the future as you're listening to this podcast. The word courage, and another operative word that I wish we would use more, especially in our industry, but we don't in business. That's the word of love. I don't think we love each other. I don't think we love ourselves. And I'm not talking about the Me Too romantic love.
Yeah.
I'm talking about love of thyself, love of a colleague, love of our team, love of a project, love of the business. Again, that noble cause. Don't be afraid of that word, right? Because it leads to a mindset of abundance. Our industry is so deep into the scarcity model that finite pie, I'm going to grab as much pie as I can. Right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest challenge, is the mindset of love and abundance. Once you reach that level, that tuning fork, amazing things happen, because the world is based around energy.
Yeah.
That's what drives us as human beings. And if we have that type of positive vibe, and I'm not talking about like hippies from the 60s smoking pot and everyone love each other. I'm talking the real stuff that's out there. Right? That we can have now that idea, all right, well, if I can automate this, it gives me more time to do what? Communicate and love.
Yeah. I mean, what a great perspective. I often ask that question, and most of the time it comes down to people adoption of change and those components. So you brought an additional perspective that's still related to people. Oftentimes I hear like there's a lot of technology there we haven't fully tapped into. The biggest thing is just helping people to adopt the change. And
but people don't want to change. I don't want to change. I'll change my underwear, thank God. So maybe get away from that word. preferred future.
Preferred future.
Let's try this. Right? And if you don't like it, that's fine, because you still have your comfort zone. But here's a big piece that's going to help. When we start to take AI into the context of just everyday work, you just mentioned there's a lot of different solutions out there. There's a solution almost for everything. Right?
Yeah.
And if there's not, we'll create one. But I started using Copilot about 3 months ago for Microsoft Office. Now, I learned recently that in Microsoft Word, there are a little over 10,000 different commands. If I were to be a true super user of Word, I'd have to learn all 10,000 commands. I don't have time in the day for that. I use Copilot. It knows everything in the suite, and it automatically does it for me. So my idea of search has changed.
Yeah, interesting.
Because it helped me, right? So I can say, I need that RFI from October 23rd, 2023.
Yeah.
I'm not looking in a folder and what did I name it? Blah, 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 blah. Natural language. Oh my God, you just made my life easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic tools. Well, I want to give our audience a little bonus here. You've talked about many topics, and all from a very positive and future thinking perspective. And I like that preferred future. I really like that. I'd like to adopt that language. So a very good perspective. All right. So we have this little bonus round for our audience to find out a little something about you that's just not necessarily widely known, like on your CV or LinkedIn, but would you share something with our audience?
Yeah, I'm a former professional musician with Warner Brothers Records.
Warner Brothers. Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
I was underneath a label in the UK called Neat Records, distributed by Warner. And it was a band out of New York City called Carl and the Passion. Big shout out, Doug, Carl. We were good. We were an 80s band. We were the American version of Squeeze, right? But what happens, especially back then, was that you were never signed as a band. You were signed to individual musician contracts, because then you're part of the union, which means they could pay you scale wages. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Business. But in New York, there's a lot of guitarists, a lot of bass players, a lot of drummers, a lot of singers, not a lot of keyboard players. I'm a keyboard player. Two interesting things out of this. Number one, we did really well. We were the house band for a while at the China Club, which was at the Beacon Theater at the time. And that was a big deal, because we were like down in Greenwich Village, playing, Kansas City, Max's Kansas City, and CBGB's, and just the real grunge places, right? But to go to the China Club, that was like wow, because all the celebrities and whatnot came in. So much so that I was on an ESPN 30/30, because the New York Mets in 1986 used to party at the China Club, and I had a picture up on Facebook showing the marquee with my band name on it, and ESPN contacted me and said, could we use that picture background? I had to sign a release and everything. And it was all about the Mets, doing coke and having fun, and girls and everything at the China Club.
Wow.
So ESPN was up there. Another thing that happened was that I learned to play synthesizers, just electronic keyboards, right? But I also had a lot of need for other things to do. So again, make your life easier, you change. So I went from piano to synthesizers to racks. And how I coordinated everything, including being able to communicate with my drummer, was through this technology that I was one of the first 100 or so people worldwide that Yamaha pulled together to create what's called MIDI, or musical interface, digital interface. So I was part of that original team.
Wow.
Yeah, and I am Forrest Gump.
That's incredible.
And what MIDI did was it allowed my keyboards to put out what's called a SMPTE code, keeping things in time, which then went to an earpiece inside my drummer.
Yeah.
Which then coordinated with the lights and then kept everything in sync. But here's an interesting thing. When we went to record, it was too perfect. So we had to learn how to use the technology and put human mistakes in there, like just off on that third snare hit, right? And it made it sound more human. We're going to need to do that with AI.
Oh, interesting. Interesting correlation.
So because with AI, it's too perfect. Yet, how do you humanize it, right? Because one thing that AI that scares the hell out of me is that for the first time in history, every human is not going to be able or allowed to forget their past. We have a selective way of forgetting things.
Yeah.
And that's how we cope to move on. AI doesn't do that. So we're going to have to do my MIDI with my instruments to AI in order to make it so that it doesn't drive you crazy. Right? But third thing, because we were the house band over at China Club, we'd have different artists come in. And David Bowie's band came in during the Glass Spider tour, and I played with them.
Wow.
Played with Bowie's band, so that was cool. Frank Zappa came by one time, Julian Lennon. So I've had it's either the Forrest Gump documentary or Almost Famous.
Oh my gosh!
So,
I mean, what an incredible history. That's just amazing, and I love the technical aspect, but also the creative aspect, and you've been able to blend those together throughout your career and life.
Lucky.
Yeah.
Irish and lucky.
So what's next for you, Paul?
Well, I leave tonight. I'm being brought over by the government of Morocco to announce this weekend my involvement as the designer for a new esports gaming city in its capital of Rabat. So they're having a big, it's called the Moroccan Gaming Expo. They have world leaders in esports and gaming and whatnot. I'm a big fan of it because I can actually talk to my sons. And for 30 seconds, when I get off the phone of talking with people at Fortnite, I'm the coolest dad for 30 seconds, and then I'm a dork again. But that's what's next. I really like the world of esports because it does blend the digital and the physical.
Yeah.
So I'm learning a lot. And I think that's probably the best thing that any of your listeners can do is learn a lot.
Yeah.
You're not sure where you're going to use it, but man, it's just an awful lot of fun in this world because everything is new and everything's changing.
Fantastic. So for our audience, I want to recap a few things that I heard. One, thank you so much for joining us, and your perspective is incredible. I did not know your history with IBM, and it really is interesting how the computer science aspect, the technology, the architecture, your love for people, and your charisma, and like all those things wrapped together, and then also the fortuitous opportunities that just have come your way. Seems like you've maximized all those, which is fantastic. But I also appreciate the effort that you had to go through for these works and the visionary to get this information out there to help shape the industry. I'd encourage our audience to go check out these books. We'll maybe get some links from you, and we'll put them in the show notes. And
thank you.
And then folks who will see the description, they'll be able to go and check out those. Thank you for your work with NIBS. It's been fantastic to have you presenting at our conferences. Always great reports. So what is very interesting is how the internet has evolved and really grown and facilitated this use for the built environment, which is so interesting because now I feel like the people in the AEC industry now are like, well, yeah, we're all about the metaverse. Like we have, this is not just a gaming environment. We have a real place in here, and this is really can enhance our business and not only our business but our lives. So I love the progression of birth and the evolution of the internet and smart cities and on into the metaverse and all the components of AI and digital twins and blockchain that make that up. You do a fantastic job of kind of breaking those pieces down and pulling them together.
It's been a privilege to have a front row seat and to have a person with a great reputation and now with your credentials to recognize that. I'm humbled. I was also humbled at the beginning part of this week. I was at an industry conference in Norfolk, Virginia, on behalf of NATO. That was an experience.
Yeah.
Talk about imposter syndrome. I'm like, am I supposed to be here?
Yeah.
But there was a kid, early 20s, and just starting out with this firm. And he came up to me and he goes, I've been following you on LinkedIn. You're the OG. And I'm going, what the hell is an OG? I thought old guy.
Yeah.
But no, it was the original gangster. And it was he was trying to say it like I respect you. Right?
Yeah, right.
So so now I'm the OG.
Yeah, that's out of all the accomplishments, that's the pinnacle, right? Oh, so good. Well, thank you everybody for joining in to Building Innovation, the podcast. Our special thanks to Mr. Paul Doherty, who just fantastic information. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your information, your vision with our audience. We really appreciate you.
Johnny, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Courage.
So yes, and before we close, that was another point that I wanted to highlight. I really loved your passion to say whatever you're wanting to just do it, get started, learn, It's very
You
inspirational
don't
message.
need permission.
Great concept. All right, so folks, you can subscribe to our Building Innovation podcast wherever throughout multiple podcast channels. We're on all the major channels. Be sure to check out our NIBS YouTube channel for more great content. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it and share it. Tell others about what's happening here, and we're trying to bring the information and inspirational stories and great history of the built environment to you. So thank you. Please give us feedback as you can, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to Building Innovation, the podcast, the official podcast of the National Institute of Building Sciences. For more information, visit our website at nibs.org.